わさびアニメすごいですね。
Hello, hello, and welcome to Tabletop Otaku. As always, I am your host, B Zelda. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm coming at you here on behalf of Origins Game Fair, and we are going to be talking about literally two of my favorite things in the entire universe. Mark, I'm sorry that you're not exactly one of them, but D&D and anime. That kind of makes you my favorite human right now.
Mhm.
So, Mark, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? What do you do?
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Mark MacKinnon, and I am the president of Dyskami Publishing Company. So we're a tabletop publisher, micro publisher. We're not a big company, and we do mainly role-playing games right now, but we also have done in the past some board games, party games as well. And so that's kind of where our focus is right now. We focus primarily on anime style products, but we have a couple of ones coming out in the coming months as well as next year that aren't anime, but we do focus on creating games that are a lot of fun to play and are a little bit lighter on the rules side if we can, something that's more narrative and less maybe less mechanistic and miniature based.
I appreciate that so much. I play a lot of D&D, but if I'm going to be completely honest, the amount of dice that I actually roll, not a lot. I'm just here to tell stories and play a good game with my friends.
Yeah, I mean that's what I grew up with D&D to start with, but when I moved into the Amber Diceless role playing game, everything changed for me at that point, and I realized that the narrative structure of role playing was far better than the game structure. And so all of my games kind of migrated more towards not fully diceless, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean I think that's very difficult to
Dice are
pull off, but
fun.
dice light. I mean dice have their place, no
There you
no
go.
doubt. I enjoy rolling my d20s when I'm playing D&D with my family as well, but at the same time I think playing the role and playing the character, to me, the narrative structure takes precedence. The theater of the mind role playing style is what I
Yes.
like.
So I have to ask, what is your origin story? Like, what made this publishing company what it is?
Yeah, well, my parents was killed when I came out of an opera theater
Uh-huh.
by a
Uh-huh.
gunman, and and then
Yeah, that
I
feels
wore a
right.
cape.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my origin story there. No, so going back, as I mentioned, I did a lot of gaming, and I got into playing. But we had a friend that come over from the UK who was touring around North America, and he came and stayed with us. And we're outside Toronto, we're a Canadian company, and so we went into Toronto for a day and went shopping in different stores. We went into an anime store, and he had found a box set of Ranma One Half first
Oh my
season
gosh.
on VHS tapes, and he said it was very very difficult to find that
VHS
in the
too.
UK.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
VHS. I mean, this was back in 1996,
Oh my word.
and so whenever he bought it, and then he came back to our place and staying, and he was going to continue on a train trip across North America. He said,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you just hold on to this for me, and I'll get it on my way back before I head back to the UK, and you can go ahead and watch it if you want. I was like, okay. So, and
If you
I
want.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was, I liked my anime, certainly, whether it's Astro Boy, Battle of the Planets, Robotech. So I watched some of the more old school stuff. I
Yep.
wasn't really a full on otaku, I'd say, at that point. And so when I had this opportunity to have the Run My Own Half, I thought, oh, I'll pop it. And I knew a little bit about it, but I had not kind of consumed it in of large amounts. Then having been able to watch the entire first season, it just blew my mind. And I thought, I want to play One Half. I want to play this game,
Oh my gosh.
but I mean, I was a D&D player. I played Amber Diceless, as I mentioned, and there wasn't anything out there that I thought could do what I wanted to do. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'll just create my own game so I can run this for my friends. So sat down to create Run the One Half game, and writing that, and then as the process got going, I realized, well, if I just expand this a little bit beyond romantic comedy, a little beyond martial arts, anything goes, maybe I can create a universal anime system that can kind of run anything. And so I worked on that for a while, and that's where Big Eye Small Mouth came from. It's since been kind of morphed into BESM. The acronym that came up it's a lot less of a handful than Big Eye Small Mouth every
It is.
time.
Yep. Thank you.
And so that game, I published it in 1997 at the Origins Game Fair. So I was part of the small publishing cooperative at that point.
Oh my
I
gosh,
came out,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, I came up with a game and put it out there for the first time. And my expectations when I printed 1,000 copies, and I thought, well, maybe if I sell these over my lifetime, a little hobby, it'd be kind of fun.
Over your lifetime. Okay.
Yeah, that was my goal because I was going to be a chemist. I was in University of Guelph at that point.
Yep.
I had was doing my master's degree in chemistry, so publishing was never something I was going to do. It was kind of a fun hobby, but the reception I got was fantastic. It got nominated for Game of the Year for the Origins Award for Best RPG. It sold out of the 1,000 copy print run within just a couple of months, which
That's
by
amazing.
by today's standards, it's not groundbreaking, but for a small company that really
In
didn't have any
97?
expectations, 97, when it was really difficult to break into the industry. It was more about desktop publishing back then, as opposed to full on company. And so that opened my eyes to see what I can do. And I thought, well, maybe if there's this much interest in a game that I created, maybe I can do more. And so the company was created from there.
That is amazing. Also, I really want to highlight, it sounds like you did all of that in a year.
Yeah,
Your
I mean,
work
that's
ethic is astounding.
while doing a master's degree. So back when, in university, a lot more time than I have now with, kids and jobs and responsibilities and whatnot. But in university, you could stay up to 2, 3, 4 in the morning, role playing, day after day after day. Not a problem. Can't do that anymore, unfortunately. So, but it was a really small book. It was only 96 pages, 16,000 words. I mean, where the products we're putting out now, the big, hardcover games are clocking in closer to 120,000, which is only 16,000. Very rules light. As again, I said, this kind of took from Amber Diceless in terms of the rules light system. And so it was a very small micro game, but going forward, I realized I couldn't continue doing this by myself and I had to bring on some extra help. And that's how the company grew from there.
That is so wonderful. So what is the transition between this first edition to the 4th edition now? And I know that is a big question, so we
it is
highlight some of the best and your own personal favorite parts.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit quickly about the transition. So when after the first edition, then I had the opportunity, which kind of fell into my lap, to publish the Sailor Moon role-playing game. It's a weird story, but
I keep looking at this and oh my God, it makes me so happy.
Yeah, that was in 1998, and it was a really strange opportunity where, on a lark, I just decided to investigate if a license was available, not expecting it. I mean, Sailor Moon is a huge show, and when I called up the company, and they said, "Oh, a week ago, the company that had the rights went bankrupt, so they're available now. Do you want them?" So I got incredibly lucky to get that, and so
cool.
It really was, and very unexpected for a kind of a one-person operation back then. But what that ended up doing, it showed me that licensing was certainly a strong suit. And a lot of the evolution of what later became known as the Tri-Stat system. Initially it was the BESM system, because that's all I had, but it evolved into the Tri-Stat system. And a lot of it came from the different variations that I did whenever I did Demon City Shinjuku, Dominion Tank Police. We did Tenchi Muyo, Hellsing, Trigun, El Hazard. All of these shows all changed the Tri-Stat system in various ways. And that evolved eventually into 2nd edition, when David Pulver was instrumental in bringing him on. That evolved into Silver Age Sentinels, which was our superhero role-playing game that we did, which is kind of taking BESM 2nd edition and bringing it up to a new level. It evolved into Tri-Stat DX, which was a standalone, just the Tri-Stat system, where the DX stood for the different types of dice that you could use. And so rather than a D6 system, it became a D whatever system you wanted. And that eventually evolved into 3rd edition. And now 3rd edition changed a lot compared to what was on the previous editions of BESM and the Tri-Stat system. But 3rd edition is also where I tapped out of the gaming industry. Which, unfortunately, the Guardians of Order, the company I was running at the time, just could not survive many different factors, mismanagement, exchange rates. As a Canadian company, the exchange fluctuations just decimated our company. And so I left the industry for almost a decade. And when I decided to come back, and naturally, BESM was something I was interested in, but I had sold the rights at that point as Guardians of Order was going under. We sold them to White Wolf. And so White Wolf had, they had multiple variations of the company since then. White Wolf went to CPP went to Paradox. So a lot of changing with that, but it was great that the company that I eventually ended up working with, the Paradox, they were willing to license the game back to me. There was other companies that were interested, but the realization, of course, that no one knows BESM better than I did as a creator. And so while we don't own BESM anymore, it's going back to the original sandbox back from 1997, my first role-playing game, and to play in that again. And of course, like many things, whether it's technology involved, board games changed, my design capabilities changed as well. And so I think I created a significantly better product. In my opinion, objectively, fourth edition BESM is the best version of BESM out there. So that was quite an evolution over 15, 20 years.
Oh my word, yes. So, okay, you don't have to answer this with any amount of detail, but like, do you think that like in that 10 years of being away from the games industry, like, was that a lot of growth for you? I imagine you got married, you had kids, like you did a life.
Yeah, there was a lot. I went into sales. I mean, as I mentioned, I was kind of trained as a chemist in university, but after running a publishing company for a decade, I wasn't really that keen on getting back into sciences. So getting into real estate, it certainly made sense from a sales background. I since have got into politics. I'm a city councilor here in Guelph, and nice. I'm on my 7th year as a city councilor. And so there was a lot of growth opportunities, children growing up, playing a lot more games. I mean, the boom that came from the Euro market for board games just really completely changed the elegance of game design in many ways. And it opened up so much creativity with so many different companies. Not that board games and role-playing games are very similar, but that certainly was a huge change. And taking those evolution of game design as well as the attention to more indie design as well, I think was a great focus to come up with as a new publisher. And as a company, Kickstarter changed everything.
I mean, if I wasn't there was a time, it was like 3 months ago where BESM, y'all were kickstarting your project. I think it was literally for the 4th edition, and I regret it now that I didn't back it. But there was some I would open up the page like once a week, and I would just look at it and think like I should do it. I really should, but I also have a backlog of at least 20 to 50 games that I could play.
Yeah.
I'll get there eventually, but you want to look at the really fun, new, shiny things.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean by that. It's difficult to not buy everything through Kickstarter, but from a publisher, it changed the market. Back when I used to publish through Guardians of Order, the publisher took on all the risk that you could have a pre-order system and distribution and retailers, but it was very front-ended on the publisher to take a risk, not knowing what your print runs are going to be. A quick funny aside, Dominion Tank Police, when we published that, I didn't know what the print run was, and I thought, I'm going to print 3,000 copies. I think that should be sufficient. So I printed them. Yeah, it seemed okay for me, and we were printing them at the printer, and it sold out in 2 weeks. Like, oh my gosh, this is a massive hit. So I ordered another 3,000 copies, and over the course of the product life, I sold another 400 copies of that 3,000. Apparently, if I had printed 3,400 copies, I would have had enough, but I overprinted on the reprint because he had no idea about demand. It was a lot of guesswork back then. As a small company, we took all the risk. Well, now Kickstarter gives us an idea of that demand. Anime 5e, which is the Kickstarter we just ended in the spring, it ended up with over 600,000. We had 8,000 backers. I never had any clue we were going to do that well with it. I would have severely underprinted Anime 5e, not fully understanding what the market was. But the Kickstarter allowed us to understand where our customer base was and print appropriately from that. So yeah, it changed everything.
Oh my gosh, that's really wonderful though. I'm also really excited for Anime 5e. What can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Anime 5e is our way of presenting a balanced point-based kind of bend to traditional 5th edition. So back in the early 2000s, when the OGL came out and 3rd edition D&D turned into the D20 system, we had taken the BESM system and turned it into BESM D20. And it was met with a lot of people liked it. It didn't, I think I was just say my inspiration for it wasn't from the most creative point of view. And I think I was more jumping on a bandwagon back then rather than trying to create the best game. Also, a certain amount of arrogance thinking BESM's the best game out there. So I want to get D20 players, show them how great BESM is, come on over to my game. So that was, a much younger Mark and what his opinion was. And so fast forward all this time forward, now we're at 5th edition D&D and the OGL is still out there for 5e. And when I looked at it, I said, well, I think that there's still some real value in what BESM brings in terms of a flexible point-based, attribute-based system where you can choose your powers, and it's a more balanced structure as opposed to, say, 5th edition, which is a more powers-based and more difficult to kind of peg what's balanced and what's not. And so the advantage of a point-based system, whether it's a GURPS or Heroes or Tri-Stat system, it allows you to create a balance. And so if I take advantage A or advantage B and they both cost 2 points, and theoretically they're both balanced, assuming, of course, that your points are reasonably attributed. So Anime 5e was taking the point-based ideas that I brought of a power structure that we had in BESM, anime type powers, and bringing them over to 5th edition D&D style game, while balancing out all the classes, all the races, and bringing it down to points based. I mean, I know when I was young playing D&D, you roll up your character. And if one player rolled 10s across the board and the other player rolled 16s across the board, that one character that's had 16s was just more powerful. That's just the way it was. There was no balancing. You rolled your points. Well, in Anime 5e, you still can generate your ability scores through rolling, but because you pay points for your ability scores and you have a pool to start with, if you have really high ability scores, it means your other things you're going to buy, maybe the more powerful races, maybe additional attributes and features you can add on. You're not going to be able to afford as many of those if you have really good ability scores. But if your ability scores are low, maybe you're going to get that kick-ass race. Maybe you're going to add on those extra powers. And so theoretically, every first level character is going to be better balanced than if you randomly generate your ability scores and then choose rage. Because I mean, does everyone think that an elf and a tiefling and a halfling and a dwarf are all equal powered? I would tend to disagree. And certainly from a point-based system, I think I can demonstrably show that no, they're not balanced races, where Anime 5e is designed to bring that point-based narrative structure to traditional 5th edition. Whether we succeed or not, that's everyone's personal opinion. But it was a philosophy that we approached that design, and I think a lot of people can really appreciate that they can then know, well, what is the effect if I take this particular race and I want to make these changes? I want to add on this feature, take away this feature, and then from there they can determine what the ramifications are because we provide point-based from that.
I really like that. So have you had an opportunity to play a decent amount of Anime 5e yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Had to role play it. And the great thing about Anime 5e is because it is based on a well-known 5th edition system. I mean, I certainly play D&D 5e over do Zoom and Discord with my family right now. So it's a very familiar system. You're still rolling your D20. You still have your saving throws and your ability scores. So there's not a lot of new play session that had to be done. And because a lot of the power structure and the abilities and the features come from BESM, which has been extensively play tested as well. The Anime 5e system was kind of a blend of two well-played systems. You just had to make sure they mesh well together. And running through those games showed me that, it's a great amalgamation of two well-known systems.
Okay, now for my own self-knowledge, are there new feats that have been introduced, and are they absurd and anime-based?
They are kind of, except it's not feats. So feats are in 5th edition, feats are a replacement for the ability score improvements. So you have a bunch of different feats, and feats were kind of ruled 3rd edition of D&D. When we did BESM and then translated over to Anime 5e, we didn't use feats because there was an attribute structure that contains much more breadth and flexibility. And so without having, so a particular feat might be in this combat situation, under these conditions, you get this advantage, and that may be a feat. Well, you can replicate that by just buying the attributes that give you something similar or a variation on that. So we have something called combat technique. We have ways that you can get advantages for certain dice rolls, whether it's you could do an initiative roll and get an advantage on an initiative roll. That is an attribute that you can get called edge. And if you take edge at level or rank 3 or 2 or 1, whatever that is, I don't remember off the top of my head, but these are different ways to replicate what feats are. But feats themselves, because feats are very, very specific, we did not use feats because we have a much more flexible and a broader scope attribute structure to replicate that.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so now, I'm sorry to anybody in chat who's not super into the nitty-gritty of D&D, but there are some very mechanical-based questions that I'm just very curious about.
Sure.
Classes and races, are there any things that have been added? Anything that's like what makes this different? Like if I want to play an elf of a type, what are my options?
Yeah, so what we did is we decided early on that we didn't want to mess with the existing fifth edition races and classes. So we have 14 new Anime 5e races, 14 races, 14 classes.
Oh
so
my gosh.
Just like how elves, you have your elf and you have your drow and you have your wood elf and your high elf. I mean, these are all different races. We have 14 very distinct anime races that, for example, they might not all be exactly stereotypical high fantasy. So really a dwarf and an elf, you're kind of your staples for your high fantasy.
Yeah.
We have Nekojin, so your cat girls or cat boys or
I need
your
that.
cat. Yeah, so we have that. We have slime. You can play a slime as a main character.
Oh, that's a dream of mine.
Yeah, but we also have, you can play a 30-foot archfiend. So we have huge and large characters as well as small and diminutive. So we have a fairy. You can play a 6-inch fairy if you want. And we approach sizes a little bit differently than they do in traditional 5th edition.
Mhm.
So we have a breadth of different classes and races you can choose, but you can still use traditional 5th edition. If you're choosing a race, we give you a point breakdown. This is what a stout halfling costs. This is what a tiefling costs.
Okay.
We tell you what the points are if you want to integrate those into 5th edition. With the classes, what we did is we took the approach from a point-based system that every class should balance to 200 points over 20 levels. So on average, 10 points per level. Now, not every level is going to be the exact same because some abilities you get are a little bit more powerful than other abilities. And so they have to mitigate it out. And those 200 points per level, those points are being used for everything from proficiency bonuses, proficiencies on saving throws or armor, weapons, skills, tools, as well as hit dice. The amount of hit dice, if you have a D12 hit die character versus a D8 hit die character, more of those 200 points go towards your D12 because you're a tougher, bigger, bruisier type character.
Okay.
And so when we brought that assumption of 200 points over 20 levels, and we built all of our 14 classes to be 200 points over those 20 levels, what we then did is we went back to the traditional 5th edition and we said, let's rebalance all of the classes by adding on additional bonus points if we didn't feel that they were quite up to snuff. And according to our point-based breakdown, barbarians and wizards were both 200 points. They just, the way our point worked, they both have 200 points of features.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty well. I mean, they have different ways of getting to 200, but we consider them both equal to all the Anime 5e classes. But then we took stuff like rogues and rangers and druids and clerics, and we thought, well, according to our point-based breakdown, they are under 200 points. So they need to be bumped up a little bit. So you might add on 10 extra points onto, let's just say fighter class. I don't remember what the exact number was. So over 20 levels, we have to add 10 points back in because a base fighter only had 190 points. Again, I don't know what the exact numbers were, but we balanced them out to 200 points over those 20 levels by increasing the power. So people will say, oh, are the Anime 5e classes, are they on par with the D&D classes? And I would say in general, they're more powerful than D&D classes. And then that's why we brought up the D&D classes to be at 200 points, with the exception of Barbarian Wizard, which we do believe we're balanced already at 200. And so that was our approach to that. Lots of variation, lots of really anime feel, like rather than a fighter type, we have a samurai. We have a ninja. We have this here. This is our tech knight. So this is our, they have a suit of armor that they ended up getting when a spaceship crashed onto your fantasy world. And there was these banks and banks of this high tech armor, and they became the Order of the Tech Knights. And that is now a class that you can take, and you have this special type of armor, and that's what you have. We have a lot of non-fighting classes. So that's, of course, the D&D is the base assumption of standard 5th edition is a lot of it's going to be dungeon delving, beating up creatures and taking their stuff. And I've certainly enjoyed playing those games.
Right. That has its space. But
absolutely. But I didn't want to just create that. And so we have classes that are not fighting types at all. We have broker class. A broker class are kind of like your social networks, your acquisitions artists. So if you're looking to get that certain item, you go to a broker, like a store shopkeeper, right?
Yeah.
But this isn't your average run-of-the-mill guy that just runs a store shop. These are people that specialize in rare artifacts, that might have dimensional portals, that have special augmentations that they have. We have that as a class. We have a pet monster trainer class. So if you want to, if you want to be Ash Ketchum, is Ash Ketchum going to be slugging people or taking up a sword and fighting people in a dungeon? No, but he might send out his pet monsters to fight in his stead. And so we have many different classes to operate that. And of course, we have Isekai student as a class. So if you want to play from any other, whether it's Earth or a different place, and you're the high school student that gets sucked into another dimension and it's a fantasy world, that is now a class, and they're going to be heavily based on followers. So they're going to be established. They're going to have lots of minions. They're going to have lots of luck. So they're going to be doing tons of dice re-rolls in their progression. They're going to get items of power, special artifacts. This is part of their class progression that goes. And again, they're not a fighting type. They can choose with the additional points that they get to maybe specialize in some aspects. Because one of the things that's a little different than we have for Anime 5e, a lot of people have asked us, is like, oh, do you have subclasses? So we don't have subclasses, and really what a subclass is, if you look at a D&D game, a subclass is more of a choice than anything else. So I'm a fighter type, and when I get to a certain level, I can choose to be fighter type A, fighter type B, or fighter type C. So these are paths that you can take. Well, in Anime 5e, we do have some prescribed abilities that you get at a certain level. So you advance from level 1 to 2. Some classes may say, here's the exact ability you get, but some other classes may say, and you also get 2 or 3 bonus points you can spend on whatever you want. And this is why we don't need some classes, because you have the flexibility based in that we don't give a prescription for every single point for every class. Some classes have more points to spend that are free, so to speak, and they can choose their own direction, which is when I mentioned earlier about we have 14 classes all balanced to 200 points. There's one exception, and that is the adventure class. The adventure class is they're only 190 points, so a 5% penalty, because they have no baked in abilities per level. They only get points. So that amount of flexibility, they can choose any ability you want. They can fly, they can teleport, they can do spells, they can choose where they spend their points. And our belief comes from flexibility is itself a power. And so that's why we give them a little bit of a penalty. They don't get the full 200, they're going to get 190. And because of that, they get to choose anything they want with the points that they're given.
That's going to be the first things that DMs say, like, all right, you're playing in my game, you cannot be the adventurer. You have broken all of the games. You set everything on fire. Like, all I wanted you to do was walk a grandma to the store.
It can be really problematic if you don't use benchmarks. I mean, that's the one thing that when you play D&D, and it doesn't matter what level you are at, you're going to be contained in a certain size box, which makes it easy to have an internal balancing system when you know you're not going to go wildly outside that. But for the anime game that we wanted to create with Anime 5e, we wanted to give a lot more flexibility, which, because it's a point-based system, you can potentially break the balance if you do not have benchmarks put in place. And we give suggested benchmarks so that you're not going to have a first level character that has a 24 strength. You if it's just points, why can't you buy a 24 strength? Why can't you buy why can't you buy speed so you can go 1,000 miles an hour, in running?
The highest dex possible.
Precisely. You could do that in a strict point-based system if you have the points for it, but that can make it really, really difficult for players and GMs to have something balanced. If everyone else is doing, your D8 damage of your longsword, and you're pulling out a magical wand that's doing, 10d10 damage at first or second level, that could be a little crazy. And again, from a point-based, if you buy it, you can afford it. But benchmarks are a way to rein in that, to say, okay, here's the confines. We're allowing you to build your character, so you're not going to be outside the balance structure of the entire game.
I have a really good question in chat, and it's to bring back the isekai comment. So at what point are we going to introduce a typical bus character that will kill our main character so they can get sent into another world? Can that be an NPC?
Yeah, that's backstory. So that happens in advance. It's certainly, death in order to start the story is great, which does bring to, I mean, that's one thing. It might be a bit of a joke for something like that, but the very first thing we talk about in the book about creating the character isn't it rolling up your ability scores or choosing your race or your class. It's session 0. That is the very first step on character creation, is sit down, ideally in person or over digitally, to Zoom as an example, or Discord, and talk about the game with the dungeon master, the other players, so that you're all going to be on the same page and collectively create your characters together. I mean, I've created so many D&D characters over my lifetime, but most of them I created them by myself, and then you show up at the game with your character.
Oh my gosh.
That's
And you
not the
don't
best
fit?
way. No, well, that's exactly, you don't know if you fit, or it's like, hey, I'm playing an elf ranger. And then four other people say, yeah, that's what I created too. And you
Or you're
could do
the
that.
elf ranger and you're surrounded by golems.
You could, or you could be the elf Power Rangers if you're playing Anime 5e. But there's an advantage in collective creation, so that everyone can kind of work off each other. And this really came out strongly. It's not an Anime 5e, it came in with BESM, where I was running a kind of Cowboy Bebop Firefly style game where there was a ship, a cargo ship, and you ran around doing different missions, and everyone got to sit down and said, okay, I'm going to be the engineer, and I'm going to be the weapons person, I'm the captain, I'm the medic. And so by dividing up the different kind of factors in that you're going to have in the game and the roles, and you can then say, oh, well, I want it to be the heavy bruiser guy, so I'm going to take a really high combat ability, so everyone knows, oh, okay, well, that's going to be their area specialty. I'm not going to take it that way. My combat ability is going to be more tech gear based, is what I'm going to do. And so they both have similar effects. It's almost like a barbarian and a fighter. They both can do the same thing, but we wanted to make sure that every player can shine and have their niche and their thing. And that's why the session zero is so important for create any game, and Anime 5e, BESM, it doesn't matter what it is. But we do stress that is the first thing you should be doing, is sitting down, understanding the parameters of the game, the setting. What you don't want to do is create a character that is completely outside of what everyone else is going to expect, right? Like it just doesn't fit well. That's not going to create the best role-playing experience if you don't collectively get together and decide as a group what to do. And so, that's, if you can decide on what your backstory is, that's the time to do it.
No, absolutely. I have just an absolutely silly question. Do you have any experiences where you've made a character and then you've gone to join the game afterwards and it's just like, wow, I do not fit in. Like, this character is a sore thumb.
Yeah, I mean, not for recently, but back in my university years, I was going to sign up for a new Mage game with Mage. And so I showed up with my kind of drug dealing high school student. And well, let's just say that was completely outside of where everyone else was. I was this young punk kid that was kind of a bad boy, and everyone else were more like save the world, we're awesome mages. And I was like, wow, this really didn't work. So that was my fault for not understanding the parameters, but also, for the game master to not kind of give you those parameters when he set it up. You can have a lot of fun with just showing up with gonzo characters or randomly generated characters. I have a book called Creative Casting, which you're generating random backstories for your character. This is, goes back 20 years, and it's a lot of fun. You're like, oh, look, I have this thing that happened in my backstory, which is super interesting. And it can be fun, but it's not going to have the same narrative cohesion, I think, to tell a really amazing story if you don't kind of create them together.
Exactly. There's a certain amount of buy-in that you should all do together. That and setting up expectations, especially with a genre like Anime 5e. I imagine you're all going to sit down together and say, like, okay, what show do you want to play? And you're gonna get like, I want to play Dragon Ball Z, I want to play in Sailor Moon. Somebody over there is gonna be like, I just want to be Ash Ketchum playing Pokemon. And then you've got one weirdo that says they want to be in Gundam. So it's kind of up to the GM to be like, okay, mecha Pokemon that goes Super Saiyan and transform. Like, we can make this work. And
you can.
Yes.
Probably not at first level. I mean, people have been saying, it's like, oh, well, how do I create Goku in Anime 5e?
Yes, like, that's honestly what I need. You have no idea.
You can, but you realize D20 kind of goes, 5th edition up to 20th level. Goku is not within a 20th level structure. So if you're like, I want to be a first level Goku, probably not. Someone like, I have a slime template, as I mentioned, a slime race. Someone said, oh, I want to create Rimuru from the time I got reincarnated as a slime. I'm like, you can't do that as a first level character. It's just the scope is just out of this range for something like that, his power level. And so, sitting down and determine, first of all, what kind of show or subgenre. Anime 5e is very much intended to be a fantasy game. That's not to say that it has to be Tolkien-esque high fantasy. There's a lot of range within fantasy, from Harry Potter to if you want to go more Earth-like urban, up to your urban fantasy, your steampunk fantasy, your dark fantasy. There's a massive range for that, but we do kind of still focus on the fantasy. And it's important in session 0 to determine, well, what subgenre of fantasy are you all going to be playing? As if you're creating the loner vampire broody type in Castlevania, and you're playing a Pokemon game, well, maybe that's not going to be a good match.
Also, now I really, really, really want to play that. I just want to edgy vampire lord that won't go out at night, and all my friends are like Misty and Brock, and we have to go save Nurse Joy from an avalanche. But really quickly, I do just have to talk about how Tabletop Otaku is powered by Origins Game Fair. I would love everybody to join me and thousands of amazing gamers at Origins September 30th to October 3rd in Colombo, Ohio, and online all around the world. Event submissions are open right now. You can share your love of gaming by signing up to run an event. Game masters and volunteers can get lots of awesome perks, including free badges and even hotel stays. Now, as a professional GM, that is so worth it. You give your love and your time, and then you get to get that all back in by spending that time with the people at Origins Game Fair. So you can find out more information at originsgamefair.com. All right, Mark, what is the first character that you had to make once Anime 5e was completed? Was it Ranma 1/2?
Interesting not. It was more Sailor Moon. I wanted to make sure that we could appropriately, actually Sailor Mercury is kind of my favorite, but I do want to make sure that I hit the highlights. So yes, I wanted to make sure that, can we create a Ranma character? Can we create a Sailor Moon type character? Could we create someone who's more bounty hunter / roguish? And so it's creating these characters up and saying, is this appropriate? And maybe some of these characters, like when I did a Sailor Moon character from the show, they can't be a first level character. You just can't. You're creating a character that is, it's before the show. Now that said, we have a magical girl class where at first level they get their companion. So you'd get a Luna type, some sort of animal companion, and you may get a small attack ability, maybe doing a D4 damage kind of thing. So you're shooting some love hearts from your hands or from a wand, but you're not going to be doing incredible amount of damage. But you wanted to make sure that the major archetypes could be done from there. Record of Lotus War as an old classic example of fantasy. Fantasy D&D. That is Record of Lotus War, and you want to make sure that you can hit those high points. You can replicate what's in traditional 5th edition fantasy, as well as a lot of the other shows and subgenres that you're hitting. So, we're not going to be able to mimic every power perfectly. I mean, we have a Discord server and people asking, well, how do you create this power? And some of them from a particular character of a particular implementation, it's going to be, well, that's a unique attribute. So we have all these attributes that you can take, 40, 50, 60 different attributes, but we also have something called unique attribute, which is, well, you define what it is. And then, wonderful. Depending on your rank, will determine how many points it's going to be, because a specific implementation from a media property, whether it's manga or anime or a movie, we don't have we can't have a game system that recognizes every single possible ability ever. Exactly. So we give a flexible system that can mimic things that are close to that, and then you can customize it and tailor it as you best want to. Because it's a point-based system, that makes it effortless. Once you determine what the points of something is, then intrinsically it's balanced already.
Oh my word. Okay, I have two leading questions. One, because it's come up a little bit, equipment. Is there a section that introduces any new equipment to solidify, like magical wands, a guitar that might shoot laser beams, regular stuff to that effect?
Yeah, so we do have a section that address items, for example. And one of the great things about creating anything from a 5th edition game under the Open Gaming License is there are hundreds and thousands of different products that you can buy from Wizards of the Coast or third-party publishers that already have all this stuff done for you. So whether it's monsters, items, spells, there's so much out there that you can use. And we wanted to ensure that although we're creating our own system with Anime 5e based on OGL, you can import any of those from any game system that uses the OGL, and you can import them in. So if you have this special item that's in this third-party PDF that you found on drive-through, you can bring it into Anime 5e. What's the rough value in terms of points, and then you can incorporate it into the game. But that said, we also wanted to show people what you can do with the item creation system that we have. And so we provide a selection, which is certainly not exhaustive,
Oh no,
but
of course not.
a selection of different items and gear that you can have using the point-based system. So, for example, we have the 3D maneuvering gear, something like from Attack on Titan, where you could be zipping along by shooting out these ropes
I
out of a
didn't know
harness.
I needed this.
Yeah, and it's not expensive either. When you think of what it actually does, it looks great on a TV show, but what does it reasonably allow you to do? Well, it gives you a little bit of a maneuver bonus. I mean, that's the real advantage of doing this. And so it is a really inexpensive item to create. And then we also have statted out, the Ring of Power, which is basically the one ring from Lord of the Rings. And we show you that that's expensive, but it's not the most expensive thing.
What does that do for you? Does it turn you invisible?
Yeah, I mean, it allows you to go into different planes, but it also makes you a target. It turns you into a wraith over time.
So you really reapplied the truth of it.
It absolutely, and it also has a unique defect that it can get destroyed if it falls in the lava. So these are what we did is we took a lot of the more archetypical or things that are going to be recognizable, and classics, and it's not just anime because it's designed to give you an idea of how the gear system works. So we have the glaive from Krull that he throws the weapon. We have a hoverboard that you can kind of fly around on a hoverboard. We stat out so many different items, but also the more mundane items, something like a cleaning drone. Someone that just a drone that just cleans up your place, and we of course it'd be a clockwork style drone, and we give that. We describe a book of death that if you write anybody's name in it, they die. We stat that out. I was
wondering, somebody in chat was talking about like I need a Death Note style anime game. Oh my gosh! I mean, you have thought.
We sat them out.
Important.
There's so many different things to give you an idea of what can be done, but we're not saying this is the exhaustive list. We're saying look at these examples, and then this is how you create items, and you can use these as they are, or now you can take this item creation system we have, which is you create an item exactly as you create a person. The difference is you usually don't give them ability scores, but in terms of if you want to have a flying carpet, you assign it the flying ability. If you want to have wings, you assign yourself the flying ability. So these attributes are equivalent, but there's, of course, when you're designing an item, what are the disadvantages of items? Well, it could be taken away, it could be stolen, you could break it. There's lots of different things. So if I'm shooting a beam of light out of my hand at someone, or someone else has a wand that's shooting a beam of light, the wand is going to be a little bit cheaper, even though they do the exact same thing, because of the built-in disadvantage you have of it's not part of you. You can't be taking it away. And this is, we absolutely talk about the gear and we talk about items, but what we also don't do is tell people at first level, you start with this gear, this item, this amount of gold. We don't prescribe that because every game's going to be different. If you want to play a game where everyone starts out as sewer urchins and you have no money and no gear, well, we're not going to tell you have to, because that's the way a standard high fantasy adventure starts. That's not how every adventure might begin in your Anime 5e game. So we give you the parameters and then you determine what's best. Working with the dungeon master, of course, will determine, oh yeah, everyone's going to have this much money to spend on items, or everyone's going to start with basically a fantasy mecha. So everyone's going to have a mecha suit, and they give it away for free because everyone has it. And you're kind of like playing the Power Rangers, fantasy Power Rangers. You can do that in Anime 5e.
I want Voltron. Like, can I just, like, again, very strong Power Rangers vibe, but I want us to all come together as one giant robot to fight evil.
So we have that in a bonus PDF that was unlocked during our Kickstarter. We created a PDF on Fantasy Mecha, and one of them is here's your 5 different mecha, and then merge together to create Protector Guardian V. And these are Fantasy Mecha in order to do this. But yeah, there's definitely a way to do it in the game.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So for those who are interested in picking this up, and let's say they're not incredibly familiar with D&D and they have like a passing familiarity with anime and they wanted to run an adventure, are there going to be any adventures included in the book?
So not in the core book, because of course the core book will be players and game masters, and so
big.
it's 272 pages is the core game, and we didn't include adventures in it. We do have one on the game screen, so we have a game screen, the traditional 4-panel screen, and we include adventure there. And then we also have some PDFs that we're offering from drive-through, a little bit shorter, and allows you to download them and get playing right away. But then of course there are tons of other adventures out there, and you can take adventure written by any third party, and you can make it an Anime 5e game by just playing the Anime 5e characters in that adventure. If you're fighting against a particular fantasy monster, let's just say an orc. Well, an orc in Anime 5e and an orc in traditional 5th edition, there may be some slight nuances to the difference on how we balance them out with points. But if you don't worry about the points, you can fight or have an encounter with any creature from any 5th edition product whatsoever. And so the great thing about Anime 5e, while we will be supporting the line, while we know that people want to see more from us, at the same time, the amount of built-in support is much larger than we could ever provide ourselves.
That's so real, though. The community that kind of rallies around this kind of content, the stuff that they can churn out will frankly be more robust than you could, I guess, have to put into a book that you're releasing. So
yeah,
I mean,
there's only so much we can do, as a small publisher. And yes, we have some people working full time for us to do production, and we have people working on art as well. There is a limit to how much a small company can do, and so the creativity that you're going to get from hundreds or thousands of people that can publish their own products on, say, drive-through or have done so already, just makes it that collective player base is just that connectivity is wonderful.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh my word. Well, do you have any other products that you'd like to talk to us about? Because I've kind of exhausted. I had some personal pressing questions that I just had to know about Anime 5e. So thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. And so while Anime 5e is our big new shiny thing, because we just finished up the Kickstarter, and it's at the printer. It's at the printer now. So all the digital rewards have been fulfilled, and it'll be available for sale widely through drive-through, probably in September.
Okay, so I don't have to wait too long.
No, people can still pre-order the PDF system. If they were to go to anime5e.com, and they can do a pre-order immediately for stuff that we offered during the Kickstarter. The physical products will be in the fall, and specifically when. Kind of depends on COVID, depends on a lot of issues, but it's at the printer now. And so we're just waiting for those to come back, and that'll sometime be in the fall. So while that's our kind of our shiny new thing right now, certainly our BESM 4th edition line, which is, predates Anime 5e, is a very robust product line that we have over 12 different products, whether it's the core game, you get your photos, you game screen, we have books of NPCs, we have adventures. So that line is, think of anything you can do in Anime 5e, you can do in BESM, but then it expanded out to a multi-genre. It's not just fantasy. So it covers anything from horror and science fiction to romantic fantasy to kind of heavy world, apocalyptic, modern world, for example. It's designed to run anything. And that book product line is out now. It's in stores. It's available on PDFs. That is a point-based system as well that offers a lot of the same feel of some what you'd get in Anime 5e without the trappings of a D20 type system. It's a 2d6 system, a little bit lighter on the rules, a little bit more narrative. It's not level based or like class based. It's point based. So you have X number of points, and as you adventure and gain more power, you're going to be getting extra points to spend on your character. So that line is out now, and as I said, we have about 12 products of that. We have more products in the works that are going to be coming out right now. Actually, next week we're running a Kickstarter that we're starting on Tuesday the 20th, and this is for a new line of products that we're calling Tri-Stat mini game line. These are small box sets. We're taking the BESM system, being say a 300-page rulebook of Tri-Stat. Well, that's because it has to be able to cover everything. But we have a game coming out called Pixies, where you're playing pixies living in a house. And so we have pixies and we have worms, which is like dragons, and we have demonicity. So people are going into a city to fight off demons. These box sets lines, what these are, they're micro games, 32-page rule books. They come with 6 pre-generated characters. They come with 6 scenarios. They come with dice. These are kind of like your starter sets, but there's no more that comes from this necessarily. These are your complete box sets, almost like you want to have a game night with all your friends. You want to get something new. You can pick this up and start running right away. And the trio of these are running on a Kickstarter starting next week. And those are all Tri-Stat games. They're compatible 100% with BESM. We've distilled down BESM into a more streamlined, easier to understand format. But I wouldn't call these intro games like, say, your D&D intro box set. That is much more hand-holding and first-time access. These aren't intended for first-time role players who don't know anything about role-playing. They are introductory in terms of the simplicity of the structure, but not in terms of, for first-time role players. And so that's our new thing that we're going to be coming out with, the Tri-Stat box set line of these mini games. And then leading into the fall, that's a game that we've been working on for a couple years now. Whenever we license BESM from White Wolf, we also license Silver Age Sentinels, which is our superhero game that uses the same BESM system. And we license that to do a new edition of Silver Age Sentinels that we call Absolute Power. And Absolute Power is, so it's ratchets things up. It's the adage that comes from that, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's takes superheroes that we had in the setting for Silver Age Sentinels was in 2001. That was the setting of the game. Well, now the game is set in 2021, 20 years later, and superheroes, the good guys, they're all push to just grab that little bit more power so they can keep everyone safe. If I just had that more power, then I can help everyone. And so Absolute Power, which is Silver Age Sentinel second edition, we're going to be crowdfunding that in the fall. That'll be coming out next year. And we're really think that this is going to be an excellent addition to the superhero field. We know that Silver Age Sentinel was very popular when it was out, and this updates the setting as well as the mechanics, which is going to be compatible with BESM 4th edition, but ratchets it up to the next level. And so those are kind of the next ones that we have coming out. We're also going to be working on a license line of anime games that we can't talk about right now, but part of the stretch goals that we did when we did BESM and Anime 5e Kickstarters is, we're going to investigate doing licensing again, and we're just wrapping up some contracts on some of them. And these are things that we intend to create, take a show that we particularly like and then turn it into a role-playing game. We have lots of experience doing that. We've, I've written many of them in our company, in our Guardians of Order. We did well over a dozen licenses, so we tend to do more of those, and that'll bring us into next year. And the final thing I'll just quickly mention is, we traditionally, we're doing RPGs right now. We still have the Sailor Moon Crystal board game license, and so we already have 2 games out for that. We have a 3rd game that's at the printer now, and that should be out fall if everything goes well. This is a game that's designed by Richard Garfield of Magic the Gathering fame. So it is a licensed version of Hive Mind that Calliope Games does, which is a really great party game. Hive Mind is awesome. I don't know if you've played it, but it is so much fun. Well, we have the Sailor Moon version of Hive Mind that we're coming out with. And so that's going to be Sailor Moon Crystal coming out sometime in the fall as well. So that's keeping us really busy. We have products that are coming out next year, longer term plans, but we're working as quickly as we can to get us some excellent products for everyone.
When do you ever get the chance to sleep, eat, or spend time with your family?
It's interesting. During the COVID time, being locked in the house for kind of a year and a half now. Yes, I'm a city councilor, so I still have meetings, but now they're online. And when you're doing a lot of time sitting at home and you can't see your friends, you can't go out to parks and do everything that's fun. Ontario, where we are in Canada here, we've been locked down for a long time. We're starting to come out of that, which is great.
We're getting there.
We're getting there, which is good. But at the same time, it has allowed us to be much more productive in what we're doing. So we're probably about a year ahead of schedule where I thought we were going to be, largely due to being stuck in our house and not being able to have fun out there. So we're kind of banking the fun. We're creating all this stuff now so we can have super fun afterwards once it's all out.
Yes, that's how that works, I think. I think so. Nonetheless, that has absolutely been fantastic. Kingdom Come the RPG. I've got that question in chat. I don't know.
Well, no, we don't have the license. Kingdom Come is one of the best comics I've ever come across. That was, to me, revolutionary for me. Alex Ross, his artwork, that was just fantastic. The storyline is great. I'm a huge DC epic godlike fan, Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. That was so great. So what we did whenever I was back with Guardians of Order, after we did Silver Age Sentinels, we did license Absolute Power. The Authority. We licensed the Authority from DC Comics and did a super powered version of superpowers because the Authority kind of brings it up to cinematic, breaks through the traditional stories. And so we did that, but we don't have a license for Kingdom Come. You could certainly do those stories with what's going to be presented in Absolute Power, but yes, we don't have a license for it.
I think with Absolute Power, that interests me in the sense that I would want to run a My Hero Academia styled campaign.
Yes.
That's my touchstone for superheroes. I didn't get to invest a lot of my own time into Marvel or DC aside from like the cinematic universes. I mean, everybody's absorbed that though. So like when I think of like superheroes that I really enjoy, MHA, that's like anime, but that is my heart and soul though. So to gamify that would just be so much fun.
Yeah, in many ways, my hero is the perfect blend that sits right between BESM and Absolute Power. Because they use the same system. It's
Yeah.
just when we present, say, 6 levels of powers in BESM, we're going to be presenting 10 levels of powers in Absolute Power because we're just ratcheting it up in terms of what we're doing. And My Hero Academia being superhero and also anime, that's why we have the Tri-Stat system. The Tri-Stat system as a unified system allows you to play across the entire power spectrum. So you want to play a game like where you have no abilities, you're a bunch of high school kids, and you literally all you do is just do high schooly type stuff with no paranormal abilities. You can do that in BESM. You're really low powered. That's fine. You can have great adventure with that. And if you want to ratchet it up, you can do it that way as well. And we're going to give BESM players more options when Absolute Power comes out because they are compatible systems.
Oh, I love this. This is dangerous. All right, one final question. With the world and everything being online as it is the BESM system available on any VTTs?
Yes, and that's a great question. It comes up a lot. Same with Anime 5e. People wondering about that. Honestly, before kind of the lockdown, I never got into doing anything online with Roll20 or Foundry or anything. It wasn't my interest. When I role play, I want to sit at a table or on a porch, in the back on a deck and play with friends. That's how we did it. And obviously, everything changed during the COVID lockdown, and a lot more stuff moved online. So whenever we were doing the Kickstarters, one of the stretch goals was for us to investigate. Our goal was to eventually get the online platforms with the VTTs, but it wasn't going to be a priority for us because that's not where we're a print or digital in terms of PDF publishing company. But the funding that we ended up getting with the Kickstarters allow us to direct a little bit more resources towards these. Now that's said, exciting. We're still in the research phase, so I'm playing games online using these systems so I can understand what we'd want to have as a player for BESM or for Anime 5e. I want to make sure I play them before I try to get someone to develop them, because I'm not going to know what I want them to develop unless I understand where the pinch points are when I'm playing. Exactly. And I've discovered a lot. We do plan to do support. First thing, Roll20 is the very first thing we want to support with BESM. We want to support with Anime 5e, and then we'll look at other platforms beyond there. But because it's outside of our range of skill sets, I can't program a VTT right now. I can write an RPG, I can write a board game, but I can't do the VTT programming. So we're going to have to look at some outside development for that. But first, it's more research to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Understandably, you put all your points in your talent tree into a different direction.
That's pretty well
killing it over there.
Yeah, that's
Mark,
true.
Thank you so much. Where can folks find you? How can we support you?
So we're available at dyskami.ca. That's dyskami.ca. Certainly, if you just did a search for Dyskami, we're on @Dyskami is our Facebook. It's our Twitter. It's our Instagram. We are not secretive online. We're pretty easy to find. If you did a search for Anime 5e or BESM 4th edition, you can easily do a Google search and it's come across us. We're active on Discord, on all the socials, and we have a great community. We'd love to interact with people, and we hope to see more people get involved with the game and start interacting with more people in the community.
Yeah. All right, folks, I've been your host, B Zelda. You can find me on Twitter as @B_Zelda, podcaster, streamer, writer, community manager of Dungeons and Dragons. Wow, I'm stressed because I still can't figure out that they actually accept me for this position, but I am now the community manager of Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League. And if y'all had fun with us tonight, why not have even more fun at Origins Game Fair, September 30th to October 3rd. Sign up to volunteer or submit your own events to earn awesome perks, including free badges and hotel stays. Hope to see you there. Wave bye.
Thank you.